Welcome to our podcast, where we talk about the interesting, frustrating, and inspiring experiences we have as people with strongly held religious views working in corporate IT. We're not here to preach or teach you our religion. We're here to explore ways we make our career as IT professionals mesh, or at least not conflict, with our religious life. This is Technically Religious. Did you ever wonder why IT diagrams always use a cloud to show an element where stuff goes in and comes out, but we're not 100% sure what happens inside? That was originally called a TAMO Cloud, which stood for Then a Miracle Occurred. It indicated an area of tech that was inscrutable, but nevertheless something we saw as reliable and consistent in its output. For IT pros who hold a strong religious, ethical, or moral point of view, our journey has had its own sort of TAMO Cloud, where grounded technology and lofty philosophical ideals blend in ways that can be anything from challenging to uplifting to humbling. In this series, we sit down with members of the IT community to explore their journeys, both technical and theological, and see what lessons we can glean from where they've been, where they are today, and where they see themselves in the future. My name is Leon Adato, and the other voice you're going to hear on this episode is Jesse Nowlin.
Hi, everyone.
As is our wont on Technically Religious, we don't make the audience wait to hear all the good stuff, the juicy news about our guests. So, Jesse, you've got a moment here for shameless self-promotion. Tell us who you are, where you work, what's going on in your life, and just remember to tell us what your religious or ethical or moral point of view is somewhere in there.
Yeah, so first off, I'd like to start by saying thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on your podcast and on the other side of the mic, so to speak. I've got my own podcast as well. Just finished recording an episode, so it's fun to be on the other end now, or on the receiving end of this. I am the founder and head geek at a company called TABGeeks, which is a conference for small to mid-sized IT support professionals. We focus on a sponsor-free show that is focused on the content and not a pitch session, which many of the larger shows are, or only on a particular type of product line. Whereas most people in small to mid-sized companies, you've got everything from working on the printer to the coffee machine is under your purview, and there really isn't very much in the way of other conferences out there that are addressing all of those in a show. So we've built a community and a conference focused on training on those particular topics. Again, it's sponsor free. Our stage is kind of like the holy ground. You can't go up there if you're a sponsor. We don't even have sponsors on our we don't even have sponsors at the conference at all, or in our Slack channel, which is another safe space for IT people to just come ask for help and even vent sometimes. And my day job, because that's not enough to keep me busy on top of being a father of 2 kids under 3, I am also the CTO of a 500 employee real estate company that has about 75 offices across 3 states, and I manage all of that with a team of 5 IT professionals. And as you go into this in the beginning of the podcast, you asked me to mention the religious affiliation. Obviously, that's the point of this podcast. I am an Orthodox Jew, and I have found that for me, being able to take that break every week is one of the things that has helped me to avoid burnout and has helped keep me sane in this industry.
Awesome. Okay, we're going to definitely get into that more. How can people find you on social media? If they wanted to find you someplace, where would they go?
Yeah, so I'm on all the major platforms. I am Mr. J Nowlin on Twitter, or at TABGeeks if you want to check out the tech community that we've got. On LinkedIn, I'm just Jesse Nowlin. Facebook, I'm just Jesse Nowlin. And I'm active on all of them, posting all kinds of content. We've also got our TABGeeks website is tabgeeks.com, and our Slack is tabgeeks.com/Slack.
Fantastic. All right, so I'm going to round this out. I am Leon Adato. My actual title, my official title is Head Geek. I took the job sight unseen when they told me that was going to be able to be on my business card. I work for a company called SolarWinds, which is neither solar nor wind. It's a monitoring software vendor because naming things is hard. You can find me on the Twitters at Leon Adato. I pontificate about things both technical and religious at www.adatosystems.com. And I also identify as an Orthodox Jew. And if you are frantically scribbling that stuff down, trying to figure out whether it was 2 W's or 3 or whatever, stop. There's going to be show notes with all the links to everything that we're talking about today. So you don't have to do that. Just sit back, relax, let the awesome wash over you. Okay, so I want to dive into the structure of this. Now, this is the Tales from the TAMO Cloud, where we talk about our journeys both through the world of tech and religion. And I want to start off with the technical stuff. So tell me a little bit more. You sort of gave us a sketch, but tell me more about what your work is on a day-to-day basis, whether that's with TABGeeks or as part of the real estate firm. What does your daily job look like today?
Sure. So day to day, during the day, I'm at the real estate gig, as I mentioned before, and that is managing a team of 5 people, which is a challenge of handling the amount of employees that we have to support with that amount of people. It's not the greatest of ratios from what I've been able to see in my research. I've recently been doing a lot of research into this area because over the last couple of years, the real estate company grew, pretty much tripled in size in the last 3 years. And I came on about 4.5 years ago. And when I started, it was just me and one other guy. And he had been shipping computers in from Vegas to California when they would break. And it was literally like a 10-day turnaround time for a computer that had gone down. But not counting, of course, the costs that it would take to ship it, the downtime costs, and the fact that the people didn't have anything to work on.
I'm sure the end users were delighted with that. I'm sure they loved every part of that.
To be honest, they didn't really know anything better. They were using using Pentium 4 computers on a Exchange 2003 mail server, and this was 4 years ago. We are now in 2020. In terms of the forever evergreen content of podcast world, we're now in 2020, and this was only a couple of years ago. I've only just recently managed to get rid of the Windows 2000 domain that's been running for a long time because there was just so much other stuff that needed to be done. The first thing I did when I came on was up the internet from a 80 meg shared cable coax internet line to a 200 meg synchronous proper internet connection and get everybody off that Exchange server and onto G Suite. So I'm a big G Suite fan, and so that's pretty much what's going on in the day job. We have been working, and why I mentioned that I do a lot of that research, or have been doing a lot of that research, is because we scaled so much, we haven't really had time to catch up. We were just duct taping things, almost literally, just to get them working. And so now we've been taking time to pull back and reorganize and create policies and procedures and actually get this stuff standardized. And I hope to actually write a book on this one day, on managing in small to mid-size IT department.
That's fantastic. Okay, so that's where you are today.
Right, so that's the day job, and then I come home, eat dinner, come home, put my kids to bed, eat dinner, and then work for 2 or 3 hours a night on TABGeeks, doing podcasts and content and stuff like that. And you asked, how I got into it and, where all this came from. I've been into tech since I was a kid. I've told the story before on my podcast that I was, my earliest memory is as a 3-year-old. I had a toy truck that I absolutely loved that broke down. And what else was I to do other than to take it apart and try and fix it? And sure enough, and I don't know how I did it, but I took it apart and messed around with some wires, put it back together, and it turned on and it worked. And that was, that set my brain on fire. I was like, hey, there's really something here. And then throughout my formative years, so to speak, I was one of the kids that would just pick up computers off the side of the road when people would throw them away. Of course, back then, people didn't really have in mind data privacy, so there was all kinds of stuff on their computers, which made it very entertaining to look through as a teenager or pre-teenager. And I would basically just take these home and build my own home lab, and then build environments that would get viruses on the computers, and I'd work on destroying them and then try and figure out ways to figure my way out of the holes I was putting myself in. And then in high school, I started my own company fixing computers, and the rest is history. Self-taught all the way.
Wow. Okay, so that explains both where you started and how you got from here to there. So, because I know that a lot of people who listen, especially to the TAMO series, are interested to map their own career, whether they're at the beginning or the middle or even near the end, where they're just passing along knowledge themselves, to hear how other people got through it. So let's turn things around a little bit, and let's talk about the religious side. You mentioned at the top of the show that you are an Orthodox Jew, and I always like to clarify that labels are really challenging. That when you ask somebody, so what are you? More often than not, you're going to get an answer of something like, well, it's a little complicated. I'm sort of this or sort of that. So understanding that any 2 or 3 word label is not going to be able to capture the full complexity and nuance of your religious life, how do you define your expression of Orthodox Judaism today?
Well, it's kind of the same way that I describe my title as IT manager, despite being CTO and highest ranking IT professional in the business, is that, it depends what you're doing. Titles are, especially in this industry, in the tech world, titles are all over the map. It depends the size of the company you're at. It depends what you are tasked with or what you've picked up over the years. And, religion is the same way, at least for me. There's a lot of things that we're told to do. Some of it makes sense. Some of it doesn't make sense. Some people would say none of it makes sense. And, it's kind of just figuring out really what works for you. And what works for me is having that time every week where I have the Sabbath, and from sundown Friday night to sundown Saturday night, I'm totally disconnected. And I will read, secular books. I've been an avid fiction reader my whole life, but a couple of years ago when I realized that IT management was really a direction I wanted to go in, and coinciding with a book reading challenge that my sister-in-law and some family members and I set upon to do a book a week, because we're all crazy.
Sure, because you have nothing else to do, right? You
nothing better
to do. Hobby. Yeah,
exactly. So it turns out when I read nonfiction, I don't read it nearly as fast as I read fiction, so I did not succeed at that challenge, but I challenged myself further by saying, hey, I want to see if I can actually learn something this year instead of just reading 52 books, which is easy. I could do that. And it really broadened my knowledge and accelerated a lot of the things that I was working on in my career because I was taking the time to do that. And a lot of that time where I was able to do that was because of the Sabbath, because I'm not using electronics, I'm not on Facebook, I'm not on Twitter, I'm not, reading some article that is sitting in my queue of things to read, or one of the 8,500 tabs that are open on my browser at all times. And, things like that have really been both a strength for me and also sometimes frustrating, because we've got a lot of holidays where you're also not allowed to do the whole technology thing.
Right.
No work, no driving, no computers, no internet. And there's one story that comes to mind, since we are talking about being religious in tech, is a couple of years ago. It was one of the high holidays, I believe, and there was something going on at the office, and they couldn't crack it, and they couldn't figure it out, and they were working with a service provider to try and get internet back and going and something, and they refused to talk to anybody because they weren't the authority on the account, and they actually ended up saying to the tech who was on site, let's go for a ride, and they drove to my house and said, can you tell this guy that he can talk to us, please, and what he's supposed to do? And I was like, all right, fine, no problem, because it didn't break the rules technically. I wasn't getting on my computer and doing it. I was just saying, okay, here's how this and this is connected, and yes, you are authorized to do whatever they need you to do.
Sure. Wow. Okay, so we'll dive into some of that in a little bit. But okay, so that's where you are now. That gives us a good sense of where you are now. The question is that the environment that you grow up in? Because when we start out, we're sort of, we are in the environment that we're born into usually, and for most of us, we don't start to question it until, our teens, or maybe a little bit earlier, maybe a little bit later, maybe never. So the question is, where did you start out religiously? Does it, did it look like what it looks like today?
So until age 7 or 8, I was a practicing religious Christian going to church every week. And that's because my father's not Jewish. My mother left the faith when she went off to college. And, that's where we were at that point in life. And I remember being a 5-year-old when my mother told me that we're Jewish. And I was like, okay, whatever. I don't really know what that means. Cool. And then a couple of years later, she was looking for some more meaning and reconnecting with some of her family and kind of getting back to her roots, and realized that she had a lot of questions that were really related back to her roots in Judaism. And the questions that she was asking was based on the stuff that she had learned when she was a kid in Jewish school. And we were paired up with a rabbi in somewhat near to our house at the time. And they started, the process of, not necessarily the process, but just kind of talking and learning together. And at some point, it became clear that we were learning a whole lot about being Jewish and what that meant. And then we started doing those things. And a couple of years later, we moved to a more religious area, which is back where my mom had grown up in the New Jersey, New York area. And then that was when I was 10, we entered into a major Jewish community and a proper Jewish school, which had 600 kids in it, which for me, coming from rural New England at the time, with a school that had, 100 kids in it total, was quite a culture shock. And I knew none of the language. I knew no Hebrew, not that everything was taught in Hebrew, but still they teach the texts and stuff like that you're trying to translate. And I had a serious handicap in that. And what ended up happening to me is interesting, and is probably something that helped me a little bit later on, is that the school I had entered into for the grade I was in at that time, for Judaic studies, they actually held me back 2 grades. And then because I'd moved around so much getting there, I had to repeat 5th grade on the secular side, but advanced on the Judaic side. So now I had 3 years of friends and people that I knew in those grades, which then translated into a very wide network as we grew older and went off to school or went off to college, went off to study in, abroad. We do a gap year in Israel. So I knew just a ton of people, and, networking is really everything, or almost everything in this business. And that really gave me a great foundation.
So that definitely tells us your whole progression from there to here. So that's interesting. So being in the world of tech and having this strong religious point of view, a lot of times we find that those two things are brought into conflict, that our IT life, and you mentioned one case already where our IT life sort of encroaches on our religious life, and sometimes vice versa. Sometimes our religious life encroaches on our IT life, and it makes it challenging. So I'm curious if you have any other stories, because you did tell the one about having to drive the technician. Somebody had to drive the technician to your house just so you could give approval. But were there any other situations you can think of that where the two things were brought into conflict and how you resolved them?
Well, as I was saying before about the high holidays, for anybody who knows anything about Judaism and the high holidays, the entire month of October or September, wherever they fall, is basically non-existent for me. I'm like, nothing can happen. October is dead. During the month of October, don't try anything new. Don't look for any new projects. We're going to make zero progress, and that is okay. I recently had several religious Jewish people on my team, and for various circumstances, they were reassigned or left to move or to look for a new position. And I diversified my team a little bit because, not that I was trying not to hire Jewish people. We actually didn't have really any of them apply, which isn't surprising. We're in a small Jewish community in Long Beach, California, but it was helpful that I actually did not hire Jewish people for my entire team, because now I have some of that coverage where they are there, and I don't feel uncomfortable telling or asking somebody on my team who is Jewish but isn't religious, hey, can you do this thing over the weekend that I can't do because somebody has to do it, when I really shouldn't be telling you to do that, right? So now I don't have that conflict internally. It's things like that crop up over time that you really wouldn't think is an issue. And then all of a sudden you're on vacation for Passover in a different country, and there's nobody to do tech except the one older IT guy who's been there from the beginning, who is just completely overwhelmed now and has to do everything himself.
Right. And that was a point that we covered in our very first episode called Religious Synergy, where you realize that having that mix of people from different, faith experiences allows you to see the world from multiple perspectives, but also lets you get things done in a way that you couldn't if it was all homogenous. So yeah, that's definitely that's interesting. I like it.
Yeah, I like to joke around that the time between Christmas and New Year's is my most productive time of the year.
Yes, right.
Everybody goes on vacation, and I get some work done.
Right. It gets real quiet for everyone but you, and you can finally get that flow time, that mythical flow time that people talk about all the time. Yeah.
Well, that's when I catch up from October.
Yes. Well, there you go. And you start the year sort of on an even playing field, at least until it gets to Passover, and then everything goes out the window again.
Oh yeah.
Which is what we're facing now. We're actually recording this just at the beginning of March, and I think for a lot of us Orthodox Jews, we see Purim is just a week away. Passover is just peeking over the horizon, and we're like, oh, I don't know that I'm ready for all of this yet. In any case, so the flip side of those challenges is that sometimes unexpected benefits pop up that either our perspective or our training or something about our religious or ethical or moral point of view offers us an insight or a capability in our tech work that we wouldn't have otherwise had and certainly wouldn't have expected. I was wondering if you had any situations that were like that.
As I was talking about in my intro, I have moved around a lot as a kid. I've been in different cultures, and as many Orthodox Jewish people do, at least from the tri-state area, they go and study abroad in a yeshiva or a religious school in Israel for a year, and that can give you some wonderful experiences. For me, it was a particularly difficult experience because I'm not the scholastic type. I actually didn't go to college. I've just been in IT my whole life, and I'm community taught, self-taught, and have managed to make a career out of it. And going and traveling around different parts of the world gave me an appreciation for what is now our reality in cloud computing and always on, always available access to different solutions. Because I was in Israel where, and it's funny to think about it, but because they don't have work on Fridays, because Friday night to Saturday night is the Sabbath.
Sure.
Thursday night is the party night. And so if you're trying to work, which I used to do remote work for an American company, if you're trying to work on Thursday night, the entire country goes on the internet. And then again, Saturday night, the entire country goes online. And now Israel, over the years, they've increased their bandwidth, but they have one pipe that goes over the ocean that comes over to all of the wonderful servers providing, these services in the US or in the other direction to Europe. And it gets abysmally slow. And things are not necessarily available over there as readily as they are over here in the States. And so having to come up with creative solutions, even 5-6 years ago, have given me insights to kind of how to build out a distributed team here, because I was forced to think about, okay, well, if I connect this service to that one, my Google Voice calls my Skype number, and Skype will work in Israel, then I'm able to combine these services and I can have an American phone number. Or if I want to stream the Super Bowl, or if I want to, be able to use different services over there or whatever, I'm able to do that by stringing these things together. And it's that kind of mentality that, and we're sort of raised with this, when we're learning some of the Judaic stuff, the discussions that they have is kind of the logical mindset, a little bit of a Spock thing going on there, to borrow from Star Trek a bit, because we are a bunch of geeks, is thinking things through and kind of, massaging the system to get what you want out of it. And it's those experiences, and I'm sure that other people from other religions have similar stories or different things that have given them those inspirations. But because I've dealt with so many people from all over the planet and so many different types of systems, and I even did a stint doing networking for the Israel Defense Forces, for the Israeli Army, working on some archaic systems and some state-of-the-art systems, it's all given me the opportunity to have a lot of experience with a lot of different things in my relatively short career.
Fantastic. All right. So any final thoughts? Anything you want to share with the audience? Anything you want them to remember about you? How can they find you? You can remind them of that. Anything you want to leave us with in terms of words of wisdom?
Yeah, so, religion is community, and, community in IT is difficult, especially because a lot of IT people are introverted and are not necessarily able to relate with a lot of other people, and oftentimes just being able to have that time with your family where you get together, or as I like to joke, we have Thanksgiving every Friday night.
Oh my God, yes.
gives you the opportunity and the ability to unplug and unwind. And, one of the big topics that is tearing through the industry right now, and we actually have a session on it at our TABGeeks conference coming up, is burnout. Burnout is an enormous issue for IT professionals, because if it weren't for things like the Sabbath where I'm forced to disconnect, I would literally be on my phone, on my computer 7 days a week. And, there's something pulling at my brain. It's a puzzle. I'm trying to figure it out. That is our nature as IT professionals. That's how we work. We want to solve these things, and oftentimes won't be able to sleep until we do. Right. And having that time, whether it's time with family, time where you set those boundaries, or in our case where, God, so to speak, said that we're not allowed to do things, or at least, we extrapolate from what God actually said, that we're not allowed to do those things, gives us the opportunity to, have that back to earth connection and to really take that break that is necessary. I think that for me, as I'm becoming more of a manager, that focus on family and the focus on the importance of the time of taking time off to be with family, and the fact that we're forced to, gives me the insight, not just in tech, but also in management, that those are the things that are important and help keep me sane. And so as I'm managing my team, it's important to remember those things, and that other people need those things as well. And you will have people that will try to just work all the time. And there was a company, Buffer, actually, which is a very transparent company. They're a social media scheduling tool. They've been very famous about having total transparency in everything that they do, and they talk about all of their internal operations, which would be nerve-wracking as hell for me, but hey, why not? They said that they gave everybody unlimited vacation, and nobody took it. They had to turn around and tell people, here's $1,000. I think it was even per family member. You must take a week or 2 weeks, whatever it was, off per year, and we're going to pay you $1,000 per family member to go and get away, because that's important. And I think that's what's really been able to help me stay so focused and so engaged in IT over the years. If you want to hit me up on social media, I'm always very active and always happy to meet new people, talk to people. I think that networking is very important. We have, in Judaism, for Jewish people out there, we've got that game Jewish Geography, which is basically our version of how many degrees of separation. And in the Jewish world, especially because everybody is related to everybody else, or has lived all over the world, or went to school in Israel with, somebody else, it's been a huge benefit to be able to reach in and tap into some of that network. And, networking is really something that helps everybody get ahead and just learn together, which I think in today's day and age, where it's so hard to keep up with cybersecurity and all of the vastness that is the tech industry, the only way we can do it is if we work together. And so, networking is important. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I want you to come and say hi. And on Twitter, I'm Mr. J Nowlin once again, and TABGeeks is at TABGeeks. That's TABGEEKS, which I'll let you in on a little secret, actually stands for Tech and Business Geeks, because we exist at the intersection of both.
Thanks for making time for us this week. To hear more of Technically Religious, visit our website, technicallyreligious.com, where you can find our other episodes, leave us ideas for future discussions, and connect us on social media.